This conference will now be recorded.
Ben, maybe if you can go to the next slide just to kind of get some housekeeping items out of the way. So this evening is for the first of our meetings, and tonight is meant to just be for informational purposes only. So we have this PowerPoint that we're going to go through, and then there will be future public meetings, probably via the same platform here in the not too distant future. And at that point, there will be more time and will allow for and encourage public participation. And again, residents will be allowed to ask questions to understand more about the potential transaction at those future meetings. But this evening is basically for informational purposes only. And the last slide, or I'm sorry, the last bullet point on slide 2. In the meantime, if there are questions related to this, please send them to the email address that's highlighted there in the blue, and then the questions will be answered and put on the municipality's website here in the near term. So this is kind of an introduction to the sewer sale exploration that Norristown has embarked on now for, started quite a few years ago. Back in mid 2017 is when Norristown began exploring the potential sale of the sewer system. So obviously a lot of work has gone into getting us to this point here this evening. Ultimately, on January 3rd of this year, Norristown had issued a request for bids. And after, again, a couple year time period of doing exhaustive due diligence, and the request for bid went out to 2 pre-qualified firms that were interested in purchasing the system. The bids were due back on February 10th of this year, and the highest bid came in from Aqua. And again, there's representatives from Aqua on the phone. We'll turn it over to them here shortly with a bid of $82 million. So again, Aqua submitted the high bid for $82 million. Now, some of you may have heard of Aqua, kind of a large utility here in the state and outside the state. So I will be turning this over to now Mark Luca to give a little bit more background, and Mark may be handing it off to some of his colleagues as well. So with that, Mark, would you like to give a little background about Aqua Pennsylvania?
I would. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Scott, and good evening to all. Good evening, President Perry, Vice President Smith, and Council. First of all, I want to say my name is Mark Luca. I am the president of Aqua Pennsylvania. And with me tonight are colleagues of mine from Aqua. We have Tom Rafferty, who's a business development manager and has been on point working with each of you here in Norristown. We also have Bill Packer, who is our vice president of. We have 8 slides that we'll use tonight to tell you about the Aqua, including our bid and rates and the rate process. Again, I want to thank you for having us here tonight and to say that we are anxious to earn your trust and to enter into a partnership with Norristown wherein we would become your wastewater provider. We will believe that we are an outstanding partner and have provided to you references that speak to our partnerships with them after the close. This brings me to my next slide. Would you please move to the, we're on to mission. I'm sorry, Scott, thanks. The next slide, this slide number 4 speaks to our mission and vision. And we take this very, very seriously, including our core values of integrity, respect, and the pursuit of excellence. These are not only things that you see when you walk in our office or on a lapel pin, but it is a way that we conduct our business and ourselves every day. We are already connected to Norristown through the Schuylkill River. We use the Schuylkill River, one of our plants, our largest plant in Phoenixville, and we see that there is a connection between everything that we do and how it affects the environment and how the environment in turn affects us. So we see that we already have a connection here with your town. And it is important as we consider our mission is to protect and provide Earth's most essential resource. It is what connects us all every day. And we certainly feel that connection today as we're dealing with COVID-19, or the lack of connection in many cases. Please go to the next slide. So slide number 5 highlights some facts and figures about Aqua, Pennsylvania, including a combined customer count of over 480,000 customers, representing over 1.4 million people in 32 counties across Pennsylvania. We own and operate 39 wastewater treatment plants across the state, having a combined capacity of 10 million gallons per day. Some of you may know that in 2019, we entered into a purchase agreement with Delcora, which is the regional wastewater provider in Delaware County, but covers some parts of Montgomery County and also some parts of Chester County. Upon close of that transaction, which we expect later this year, we will increase our customer count by about 200,000 customers. EDUs is how they're calculated in the wastewater world. And so when we close on the treatment plant at Delcora will be ours, that will be a 44 million gallon per day wastewater treatment plant. Again, we expect to close on that in Q4, fourth quarter of this year. The next slide, please. Slide number 6 is the 2019 J.D. Power slide that speaks to residential survey and customer service. You can see from this slide that we are ranked 3rd across northeastern utilities that have been ranked. There are 18 that have been ranked by this survey. This survey looked at delivery, billing and payment, conservation, price, communications, and customer service. You can see here we're ranked 3rd. We are 1 point out of 2nd and 3 points out of 1st place. So very happy with 3rd place, but would be much happier with 1st place. Also, I would say customer satisfaction, according to J.D. Power's survey, Aqua is the top rated private utility in the Northeast region.
And I'm Bill Packer. I'm the Vice President of Rates, Regulatory Accounting. I've been on the Aqua, Pennsylvania team for about 10 years now, with the company for 15. So it's a pleasure to be here, representatives of Norristown. Our rates, how does it work? We're regulated by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. So upon closing, we adopt your current rates that are memorialized by resolution. And those rates will remain the same until the company files what's called a base rate case, which occurs about every 2 to 3 years. Our last one occurred in 2019. In May, rates were effective. We're heavily regulated again by the PUC. They look at the rates that we file for, and they certainly opine on the ultimate rates that we get and ultimately set those rates with their approval. The PUC does believe in gradualism. That's a term that basically means that they look to mitigate the impact of any one particular rate increase such that it doesn't cause what's termed as rate shock on customers. So that's something that's heavily scrutinized in the rate making process in a rate case that typically lasts about 9 months. The company has the burden of proof when we present a rate case. We demonstrate that our expenditures are prudent, our costs are reasonable, and that the investments we make in your system are needed to result in a return of investment and return on. So, and we have an obligation to provide excellent utility service. So the PUC has complete oversight of that. The process involves public hearings. There's consumer advocacy groups in Pennsylvania called the Consumer Advocate, Small Business Advocate. So it's again, a process that's heavily involved, public noticed, and customers are encouraged to participate. Ben, you want to go to the next slide, please? So customer service and care. So we have a 24/7, 365-day customer service group. We have after hours for any type of emergencies. We provide convenient payment methods electronically for our customers. And then we also have a helping hand program for those customers who might need some financial assistance. Go to the next slide. At this point, I'll turn it over to Mark. Thanks.
Yep, thanks, Bill. So slide number 9 is where we are now, speaks to employees. And it is our practice to offer employment to all employees during a transaction similar to what we're seeing here in Norristown. This slide shows 5 employees and 5 testimonials of current Aqua employees who came to us through acquisitions. Many of them have been here many, many years, decades, and have advanced their careers at their choice to advance into management, or those that would continue in their current positions, which is certainly acceptable as well. But keep in mind, given our size, employees would have opportunities at their choosing to advance into different parts of Aqua or even the Essentials Utilities Incorporated. So we provide training to improve safety. We're very, very big on safety and have monthly official training classes, as well as informal training classes like tailgates. We also provide opportunities and support for employees who want to pursue their licensing with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Aqua is truly a place where employees can thrive and advance their careers. Now, if I could speak just a moment about COVID and use that as way of example. For COVID, we have regular communications with our employees across Pennsylvania and, truthfully, across our 10-state footprint. In Pennsylvania, employees hear from me no less frequently than weekly through either interactions or emails where we highlight different bits of information that might be important to them or to their families. We also have regular communications and updates from our CEO, where we may have over 1,000 people on various calls at any one time. And we believe that communication with our employees at times like this is extremely important. And it's just an example of how we conduct business and how we rely on our employees to conduct that business, but also how they rely on us for very important information about things that are affecting their personal and professional lives, certainly right now with COVID. Next slide. Community engagement. This highlights ways in which we engage communities that we serve. During COVID, we've donated more than $100,000 to community organizations across Pennsylvania. We've spent time communicating with our customers, including outreach on KYW. I did a 15-minute blog with KYW where they had specific questions about our customers and interaction with our customers. And we've done extensive outreach to businesses that are about to reopen and how they should continue or consider ways in which they would want to flush their pipelines and be ready to open their businesses safely. We've actually reached out twice with outbound phone calls to more than 20,000 businesses across the state. In addition, we have bill onserts to remind people to pursue information on our website about how to reopen their businesses safely, which will appear for about 30 days. We've done a news release that has appeared in many news outlets across the state. And it is, again, part of our community outreach, part of our service to our customers, and part of the way that we believe communications are so important, and at this time, so vitally important to the health and safety of our community. We're also working with local think tanks with regard to wastewater about identifying the presence of the coronavirus in wastewater in the hopes that we can tie that to the health of our communities. So while we would reach out to communities like you see here with Fill Abundance, we encourage our employees to volunteer with the Ripple Effect. We also continue to work with our communities so that they know what we know, so that we help them in times of crisis like this, but also where we can use our expertise, our PhDs, our chemists, our scientists to work with local think tanks at local universities to identify better ways to help the broader communities that we all serve and live in. Next slide. Scott, I think this is you.
Yep. All right, Mark, thanks for the background. Appreciate that. So again, we sort of alluded to it early on in the presentation, sort of the time frame that we've been working on this. This just kind of highlights in a little bit more detail some of the major sort of time milestones that we've hit over the past couple of years. So again, kind of starting in summer of 2017 is when Norristown began the exploration of the potential sale. We then came in early 2018 to present our high-level valuation and analysis of the system. Then in August of 2018, we sent out an RFQ, a request for qualification, to determine overall market interest in the system. A few months later, 2 teams were determined to be pre-qualified, allowing them to take part in the bidding process. And then basically from October of 2018 through all of 2019 and into early 2020, a tremendous amount of due diligence was conducted with Norristown's team, including PFM and Tom White and his crew at Obermeyer, as well as a tremendous amount of due diligence from the 2 bidding teams as well. Ultimately, then in January of this year, RFB, request for bid, was released to those 2 pre-qualified teams. On February 10th, the proposals were received. We then conducted an executive session to discuss the bids on April 7th. And then here this evening, Ben, are you able to move that up just a little bit by any chance? No, that's all right. I just couldn't see everything on my slide. You can go back down. So then this evening is kind of our first public meeting to discuss the potential sale. Next slide, please. So early on, again, in the process, there were sort of various reasons for exploring this opportunity, and we just sort of highlighted the kind of 3 of the main ones. Number one, Norristown wanted to provide residents with quality sewer service through an experienced operator, and also kind of looking in the future and trying to eliminate long-term risk of owning a utility system. It's obviously a very capital-intensive industry, and again, trying to shed some of that long-term risk and liability going forward was one of the key issues. In the middle there, point number 2, ensuring a bright financial future for the residents of Norristown. Again, here we just laid out a few that Crandall will be going over in more detail here in a few slides, but reducing debt, promoting economic development, improving deteriorating infrastructure, providing for sewer rate stabilization fund or other property tax stabilization fund were just a couple of the ones that we're initially looking at, again, to help the residents benefit substantially from this potential sale. And then lastly, ensuring reasonable sewer rates for sewer customers going forward. So, again, those were some of the key highlights that we were focused on while going through this process. Next slide. So this is a very, very high level kind of disposition of funds, if you will, if everyone moves forward with this transaction and we get to closing. So as mentioned early on, the purchase price was $82 million. And so on the left-hand side, we kind of start out with our sources. So we're not assuming any cash on hand with the sewer system at the moment. Maybe there will be by the time the transaction closes, maybe not if we get to that point. So we're assuming $82 million. Under uses, over to the right-hand side, they're in the green. We're just making some assumptions on paying off sewer-related debt. Some of that debt has already been issued years ago, and the authority has been paying on that debt service. Others, some of that debt will be issued here in the very near term for projects that are currently going on. So again, that's just an estimate. We have estimated transaction fees and possibly some real estate escrow needs. So total uses at closing would be about $23 million. And so kind of the big picture here at the bottom of this slide, this allows for somewhere around 58 to 59 million of estimated proceeds available for use to kind of referring back to that prior slide, to implement initiatives for the benefit of the ratepayers and the citizens and the taxpayers of Norristown. Now, I think it's critical on this page to note that what we're basically contemplating at the moment is the sale of the system. As far as the use of the proceeds, Crandall will be reviewing here shortly some high-level thoughts that have been discussed so far, but nothing has been set in stone. But if this transaction is approved here in the near term, Norristown and the residents will have somewhere between 9 months and a year before closing, where a more refined and robust plan for the use of these proceeds will occur. And that, of course, will also Norristown will encourage public input on that. So if we move this along, and if there's a vote to approve the sewer sale, it's just that, it's to approve the sale, not the actual use of the proceeds. And again, there'll be plenty more time to vet that plan. Next slide, Ben. So Crandall, do you mind taking the next 2 or 3 slides here? I know you've been thinking about this a lot, and others, as far as what some of those potential uses could be applied towards.
Certainly. Thank you, Scott, and good evening, everyone. Certainly on behalf of the Municipal Council, again, welcome to this public meeting. I wanted to share, these are thoughts and ideas that really the council has been discussing as potential uses of these funds should they make the decision ultimately to sell the system. I'll also point out, as Scott said, this has been discussion that's been going on for quite some time, since about the middle of 2017, and councils have been very, very serious about this. So certainly on behalf of President Perry and the members of the council, I'm sharing thoughts and ideas that they've tossed around prior to the process of going through to get other ideas and input from residents as this public process goes forward. So one of the first things that the council discussed was should they go through this sale, it was important to make sure that there was not any real rate shock for residents. So one of the first things that they wanted to make sure of that they consider the implementation of a sewer rate stabilization fund, which would essentially offset increases, immediate near-term increases in the sewer rate, so that residents would not be burdened by that. The second one was, of course, in line with what has been one of the primary goals for council for the last several years, has been really focusing in on economic development and initiatives to help increase our tax base, thereby again lowering the pressure on existing residents, and certainly relieving the ability to have to not do tax increases, at least significant tax increases. So they are looking at things such as strategic property acquisition and development initiatives throughout town. You might know, some of you might be aware of, they started that process toward that goal a year or so ago with the acquisition of the DeLucia property at the corner of DeKalb and Main Street, which is the prime development property in our downtown. They also wanted to make sure that there were funds available to support future plans for economic development initiatives as well. One of the other considerations that council will have is to establish a property tax stabilization fund. One of the big challenges with the community has been the fact that development has been tough, but it is starting to pick up. But also since our tax base has not fully diversified itself, what we've had over the course of the years is the need to put tax increases on residents who in many cases are some of the poorest in the county. And so one of the considerations for how these funds are used would be certainly to leverage some funds to make sure that council does not have to raise taxes, at least not significantly in future years. Council has already begun the process of making park improvements in these last few years, and they certainly want to continue to do that. It is the goal of council to make improvements in every park, every municipal park in the municipality. And so part of this is to use these funds, a portion of these funds, to do these capital projects. Again, by doing this, you don't have to raise funds through taxes to help pay for the improvements that they'd actually be leveraged with the proceeds. They also are interested and have put on the table the possibility of when the municipality acquired the PAL building and converted it into the recreation center, that actually completed a goal that council had to have a singular footprint for the municipality for recreation. So the municipality already owned the property that was on either side of the PAL building and property, and now it owns practically that whole block almost until you get to Markley Street on Harding Boulevard. The acquisition of PAL was strategic in that council always saw that as the future home for the redevelopment of the site into a much more modern recreation facility. And again, part of the process would be asking for lots of community input in terms of the things that they would want to see in a recreation site on the facility. The municipality I think has done a good job over the last few years in terms of reaching council's goals of reducing our long-term debt. And in doing so, again, alleviating some of the interest costs that residents have to pay through taxes. One of the things that this will do is give us the ability to defease a lot more of that debt and give a lot more relief in terms of not having to raise taxes to support debt. One of the things that council did over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, we had a couple of studies that were done, both of them through grants that the municipality competed for as a result of council's involvement in the National League of Cities. We competed for 2 grants and won them. One was a $40,000 grant in which we dealt with the issue of resiliency and how does the municipality snap back from an issue, a drastic issue, or natural disaster. COVID kind of fits into that mold in many ways, but a natural disaster, whether it be weather-related, man-made, or whatever. And one of those ways that we wanted to do that is to establish some type of fund, and council started doing this with the establishment of a fund balance policy, and where we started making sure that we, in every budget season, would put, in essence, a rainy day fund together to make sure that municipality ultimately will be protected or have the resources on hand to lessen the impact of a major catastrophe happening in the community. We also wanted to, council wanted to look at some of the operations of the municipality. This municipal hall is failing, and we had a major flood as a result of just the age of the building. And so we're in the midst of a renovation project now. These funds could actually defease the $13 million debt that will come along with the renovation of this building and eliminate years of interest payment for that debt. There's definitely a need to make improvements and really find a better home for the public works operation. We're limited here, and this council and councils before it have invested millions of dollars in equipment for public works, for police, for other functions, and none of that equipment is protected from the weather. So an optimum place for being able to have storage and coverage for municipal equipment is essential, and actually increases the lifespan of that equipment, thereby lessening the tax burden on residents. Next slide, please. We talked a little bit about the expansion of the recreation center and municipal hall renovations. One of the other things that we have been considering, in council has set this as a goal, is that we would consolidate our fire departments. One of the challenges we have is as everybody knows, volunteerism is declining, and so we have a situation where we're paying into facilities that we don't own, but we do give annual stipends to those facilities. But many times we find ourselves in circumstances where, because of the decline in volunteerism, we can't actually utilize a lot of the equipment that we own in these facilities. Consolidation would actually reduce our need for capital expense in terms of equipment for 4 fire stations, reduce that down to 2 with a centralized fire station, and we can actually do that based on 2 things. One, we do have a RACP authorization that we're pushing through the legislature, along with the help of Representative Matt Bradford, Senator Leach. And we know that we can utilize the funds that we're paying for in essentially leasing these 4 places to help defease the second half of the cost. This sale actually would allow for us to pay that debt off as well, and relieve that burden on the tax bills of residents. We also have a pretty large unfunded pension liability for both our fire and police pensions. They suffered, as did most communities around the country, as a result of the economic bubble bursting in 2008. And while we have been in a gradual recovery period, we spend a significant amount on pension costs every year, and this would allow us to reduce those our what's called our minimum municipal obligation to pay every year is upwards of $3 million. This would, by being able to contribute in a substantial way to that fund, we can make those 2 pension programs much more stable, thereby reducing the tax burden on residents to support those programs. Council has also talked about an endowment as a possibility. One of the things that council constantly has been seeking to do is partner with the Norristown Area School District to make sure that we support the higher education, whether that be college or technical school, for Norristown youth. And so one of the possible uses of that the council is discussing is to set up a scholarship endowment that would be perpetual once it's set up, that would offer annual scholarships for Norristown resident students through that fund. Next, if there's another one. I think that's my piece of it. This does allude to the fact that these things that we're talking about doing, council has been discussing, are all in line with what was ultimately the final report recommendations from the National Resource Network, that $250,000 grant that we received. And one of those things was to look at the financial challenges that the community was facing, because it honestly, with the tax base not increasing, there are some challenges. As I'm saying, we're paying down debt, but they still have some challenges. We have challenges to go. So among the recommendations was that council consider the potential sale of the sewer system to eliminate what is essentially a structural long-term deficit that the municipality has if we don't do anything different in terms of how we operate the municipal government. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Crandall. Bill Packer from Aqua, do you mind taking this slide here to talk about, well, just to sort of set the stage. So within the bid, within the RFP that Norristown had sent out, we obviously had asked for the bid, the dollar amount or the purchase price of the system, but in there we also asked for indicative or estimated or preliminary rates. And Bill can speak a lot more to this. These are not set in stone at all. There's a long PUC process that ultimately is the one that sets the rates, but we felt it was kind of necessary to give a general idea of what rates may look like in the future. So with that, Bill, do you want to kind of highlight some of the important points here on page 17?
Sure, thanks, Scott. And that was a great summary of a lot of the benefits that are very possible as a result of this transaction. And that's really what it is as we move into rates. There's a lot of benefits, and there is a counteracting cost in that rates would be expected to go up. The company's making an $82 million investment in Norristown, and an additional $10 million over 10 years in the infrastructure of the system. And these rates are indicative of what we would possibly see. And there's a reason for showing this, because as this transaction progresses, if we were to be selected, the first thing we would do is file an application with the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission. And in that application, within the first 30 days, we would notice all of the customers of Norristown. We would notice all of Aqua's existing customers of the potential impacts on rates, just eyes wide open as a range of possibilities. And we've demonstrated two of them. Scenario one is full cost of service, the Norristown system paying for their regulated cost of service, and not necessarily benefiting from the merger into a larger, if you will, company. You know, Aqua has 440,000 water customers and an additional 40,000 wastewater customers, and that's really the power that we bring to bear when you're talking about investments of this magnitude. It's the ability to spread those costs over all of those customers. And in doing that, that's how I'm able to achieve the gradualism that I talked about earlier in my slide. And that's really one example of that would be scenario two, which is specifically utilizing a rule called Act 11, which allows us to spread the cost of service to our water customer footprint as well as wastewater customers to achieve the rate gradualization and avoid things like rate shock. So these are just two examples of what the rate outcomes could be. I think it could be somewhere in between these two, absolutely. The company's request for a rate increase in the future, in my experience, is not normally the full cost of service. We like to file our rate cases utilizing gradualism. We have a lot of experience in that. There's a lot of precedent in Pennsylvania over the years in doing so. And you can think about utility rate making and being a part of a company like Aqua as almost like if you think of it as an insurance fund, right? The bigger, more customers you have, the more you can spread out the costs. That, you know, I would submit to you that if you were to invest $82 million in your wastewater system and had to pay for that and finance that with just the 10,000 customers of Norristown, you would typically see a rate outcome that would be higher than what the company's showing here in terms of rate projections. So that's really the power and the advantage that we bring in these transactions over time. Scott?
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, another very critical part of this exploration has to do with employees of the system. So the goal was to make sure the employees will be protected. And so right now there's about 17 employees dedicated to running the sewer system. We're showing here about 14 unionized employees and 3 non-union employees. As part of this process, it has been mandated if the sale would occur that all employees are offered employment with Aqua Pennsylvania. And you heard Mark talk a little bit about that before, about the importance of employees. And Mark, feel free to chime in if you'd like to add some more. But these employees will be offered substantially comparable benefits and compensation to what they currently receive. So that was sort of one of the mandates from the very beginning, that the employees are protected. The agreement, as written, has all that language in there and will be part of the sale if it does move forward. And then lastly, as far as next steps, potential timeline going forward. So the past month or two, council has been kind of vetting this and kind of analyzing the bid from Aqua, and we're looking, maybe in June. You see there the board considers an ordinance accepting Aqua's bid, and again, these are all tentative. It's just sort of some guidance. If that would be the case, that if the board does consider the ordinance in June, if it's moved favorably and approved, then summer of this year, there'd be kind of a lot of work starting to conduct various engineering and other evaluations that are mandated by the PUC. Probably around fall or so of this year would start the PUC process. Extremely, very, very exhaustive. And that would go maybe through mid 2021, and that would then kind of effectuate the transaction and lead to the closing of if the board would move forward with this here this summer. So again, during that time frame, almost a year is when there'll be a lot more public discussion about the use of the proceeds and asking for a lot more public input, I think, at that time as well. So with that, that concludes sort of the main part of this presentation. But just kind of a quick wrap up. When Norristown began this exploration to determine the overall benefits, what kind of benefits could be realized, excuse me, by the residents of Norristown if the sale would happen. And so through this kind of very extensive, exhaustive, competitive process, with this $82 million purchase price being offered by Aqua, we feel that the funds available to the municipality will accomplish many, if not all, the goals that we heard throughout the presentation tonight that Crandall did a great job summarizing. So again, kind of wrapping up, the main components of the sale would be selling to a very experienced local operator that's heavily regulated by the PUC. The future rates will also be set by the PUC, as you heard from Bill Packer earlier. Employees will be protected in this contract, and ultimately the upfront funds that are received by Norristown will be utilized for the benefits to the residents of Norristown. And then just a reminder for if you do have questions, to please submit to the email address you see here, and those questions will be addressed and posted on the municipality's website. So with that, that was our planned presentation. Crandall, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Scott. And just for those folks who may be on the phone, that email address is pio@norristown.org. That's pio@norristown.org. If you have any questions, please send those questions to that email address. We'll make sure those questions get answered. If there are questions of myself, council members, or members of the team working with us in this consideration, we'll make sure that they get answered. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for participating. Again, on behalf of President Perry and the entire council, thank you. And we will be putting out information about future public meetings very shortly. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Righty. Thanks, gentlemen.